had helped us put into our folder. Are you able to share those, Clint? Chapter 3.
Yes, I can. If you give me just a minute here, you're going to see somebody else pop into the meeting.
So I'll just start by premises was saying that the beginning paragraph that I added, I just kind of was looking around on the internet, just kind of seeing what other people how they define what their capital facility plan is, their capital, there are many names for it. And so the verbiage that I gathered here in these 5 bullets are really just, I pulled from other places that I thought didn't necessarily exactly define what we're looking for, but I thought they were a good place to start.
Can I just say that I thought that was a very good intro, or I like that addition. It really, I think, captured a lot of good thoughts.
So one of my questions for you guys, though, was, I think bullet point 1 is pretty straightforward. Number 2 is also, I think, kind of a key element of any kind of plan like this. I didn't know if we wanted to include, 3, 4, and 5, or how we wanted to phrase those, if we need, or just leave them with these would be the kind of the goal. Again, when we actually go to make this plan, it's not like we can't change these bullets to be more defined. And so we could just leave them as they are here, but I wasn't quite sure if we feel like a 6-year plan that will finance these things. We do need to start talking about how we would finance, let's say, a jail with our current financial burden we have in our, the loans that we already have out there. So yeah, I guess I wasn't sure if these really depict what we want or where we're headed.
I like them the way this states. My only thought when I was reading this was, which I don't know that we have to include this in this section, but I was just thinking, if we go to form a committee, or I know this says the strategic planning committee, if we're going to move forward on developing this type of plan, I really think that we need some more people on the committee, and specifically people that would have input on the financial implications of all of these things. Clint obviously is going to be huge in that, but I just think we need to look for some other people, experts, that can give some information on that, because I think some of the areas where we may have gotten into trouble in the past are because, frankly, myself included, I don't have a financial background. And, when you're making these kinds of decisions and you don't fully understand what the implications are or what all's included, or maybe some of the other options, there can be decisions made that maybe weren't the best. And I guess that would be my only thing, is if we're going to form a committee to really look at all of this, which I think is huge and important, we need to make sure that we have some well-rounded and well-informed viewpoints on it.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Are you anticipating that you would want a separate committee, or, because I was thinking when we initially started talking about this, that this is something that we thought the strategic planning committee would take on. Would we bring in those experts to consult with, or are you saying that we need to bring in people as members of the committee that are have that more expertise?
I think both. I think that we should have some sitting member. If we're really going to develop a capital facilities plan, I think that we could probably find a few key players hopefully in our community pool here, that could actually sit on the committee, but leaving room also for potentially bringing in experts or advisors on certain things. Okay, for example, if we're going to be talking about the county jail, all right, well, obviously we're also going to want to include people who understand all of the requirements, and maybe somebody from law enforcement or whoever we need from that for that specific portion. But then when we're talking overall, just somebody with a background who could really give us valuable input. And that's just my thought. I just wanted to put that out there to see what you guys think as far as expanding the committee when we get to that point.
Some of this, I'm a little worried that these are great things that I think we need to be addressing, but I'm worried about adding more stuff to Clint's plate or department heads that would have some of the information we need. But I also wonder if some of this we couldn't farm out, if you will, like to the property and building committee and other people that are more familiar with some of the stuff here. And so it wouldn't necessarily have to be on our committee, but we may have to give people the heads up that we are going to be drawing on their knowledge.
Yeah, if I can chime in, Madam Chair, this is a project that I plan on picking up already as early as December, using a lot of the same bullets here for capital facilities and also other infrastructure pieces like it lists below with the radio tower project, including elements of roads and other major infrastructure pieces that we have out there. So this is something I planned on running with administratively, and if it's something that we can incorporate into an existing property committees. I know right now their language for their committee is kind of specific to a courthouse and kind of assuming responsibility over properties that kind of aren't spoken for by other departments already. But to use them as kind of the representation of elected officials that are kind of monitoring this plan is how I kind of visualized the approach of bringing this through them to probably a finance and personnel, and then onto a county board for phase one of identifying all of our buildings and what their asset value is worth and what functions they serve for us, and also addressing the deferred maintenance to get them up to a responsible level of care. So I think if we address it with the purpose of strategic committee at this point of saying this is what we're looking for, and as we continue down the road and assess it, and if it grows into something even bigger, it might not be inappropriate to form another like a subcommittee or an advisory committee to make a recommendation to an existing body. And I'm not unopposed to that, but it's something I plan on investing a lot of administration time in the near future.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
So one of the things I was thinking, like, for example, the county jail and the sheriff's office items that are on here. I mean, as chair of LEJC, my plan was to begin talking about the jail and actually coming up with, going through this entire process through the committee, because we have all the experts sitting at the table at that committee, and then presenting that information or giving that information to, the if it's the strategic planning committee or the administrator or whoever. But I mean, my plan was to start doing some of the homework at the committee level and then handing that off to, the next step, which would be the administrator or finance or whoever. So I think that we could approach that with several of these different items would fall to other committees, that they could start doing some of the homework too, so that it isn't all falling on our county administrator or this committee.
Yeah. Clint, is that kind of what you were saying when you mentioned properties, or were you thinking that this would start with properties committee?
I envisioned kind of taking it through properties as a collective body to have an understanding of all the property values. Some of this information we're going to be able to gather kind of quickly, like through our property liability insurance. We have an assessment on the value of all of our properties that are currently fall to us. When we start talking then about what the deferred maintenance is and what the annual maintenance is to upkeep and to fix some of our pieces, that's when department heads and their folks are going to be getting involved to try to understand those pieces, and then kind of building that plan then of to responsibly upkeep and to catch up with deferred maintenance. How much money do we have to bring in just for those purposes over the next 6 years, and then start matching that up with our projected revenues.
So I guess my question is, as far as when we're looking at steps of how do we start addressing these, the homework that Melissa, you were mentioning, is that something that we want to actually include on the strategic plan in the form of the work plan? Or are we just going to finish this up and then start breaking this down?
my thought is we could put some initial steps in our work plan. I mean, at least assign like what we just talked about, where we would assign what Administrator Langrick was talking about with property committee being, a place to start looking at everything as a whole picture, and then could make a statement about perhaps some of the appropriate subcommittee or committees, standing committees could, tackle some of the, I think we could put, long and short, I think we could put some of it in our work plan, and just
Yeah.
to give us a path forward, so that it's on our radar and we keep moving forward with it.
Okay.
That's just my
Okay.
thought though.
Well then, okay, so I guess to address this first paragraph or with bullet points, I mean, to me, it looks good as is. Does anybody think there should be something added? Clint, you mentioned these bullet points align fairly well with what you were thinking. Is there anything you think should be added or deleted?
I don't think so. I'd like that it's just to include. It's not, it's not just this, so it leaves other informations that we come across that's like, yeah, that would probably be served well to be known by everybody. We'll include that into it.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, one other thing that I did, I don't know if everyone noticed, but I did put, as we get down to the discretionary stuff, I did put in where I knew I put in how much money, because there was comments made that, we don't really know how much they cost us. So it's hard to evaluate whether we should keep them or not. So I did add that information as well into this plan.
Well, maybe we could scroll down if we think this first section is good for now. Hey, welcome, Carrie. Side note, did you get one?
No, I didn't.
Oh, sorry. All right. So Melissa, if you want to keep walking us through here.
Yeah, so I didn't make any changes to the order. We had initially had comments in here about changing the order around, but now that we've made the statement, and I guess we should go back to that statement. So I did put the sentence in: it is the intent of the committee that the following information be considered by County Board Supervisors as we begin the development of the capital facilities plan and work through our 2023 budget. So I didn't mess around with, there was some comments that maybe we should rearrange the order because, is this in order of priority? Is this in random order? I just left it alone because, it's just, we're basically just saying we want people to look at these. These are things that are on the horizon that we need to consider. And so I didn't think that the order mattered as much, but if you want the order changed around, I guess now would be the time to say so. So right now, under statutorily required services, it starts with the jail and the sheriff's office, and it goes to the radio towers, then to emergency services facility, which we're already doing. So part of me, I don't know if we need to just delete that, since we've already just spent we're spending $600,000 on a building. And then same thing with highway, we're already doing the sand shed. So we took that out and added a couple of other bullets in there. So I guess I would start with any comments on this first section, which talks specifically about areas in which we are mandated. Although I wouldn't.
Chair, can I comment? Yeah. This is, I've noted this for a while now, that when Troy captured these that came out of our discussions months ago, he was identifying current and near-term issues, but obviously this isn't all of our infrastructure. So I'm just worried that people will look at this and think that's the only stuff we're looking at, or that's the only thing that matters. I'm wondering, either we condense it down or we expand that out or use some kind of catch-all to point out these are just some of the highlights of things coming up, but obviously it's not everything.
Perhaps in the paragraph right before where it says statutorily required, perhaps in one of those smaller paragraphs above that, we could just add in a sentence to that effect. I know, because I remember, Melissa, you had mentioned the same thought, that you didn't want people to look at this and think that we had decided that these were the only priorities.
Right. I could in that sentence that says it is the intent of the committee that the following information be considered. We could say be considered, let me think here.
Can you
Or I
scroll
could-
up a little bit, Clint?
Right there. Yeah.
Okay.
So I could add a second sentence that says this list is by no means exhaustive of all. Let's see, this intended, let's see, this list is intended to highlight like some areas of concern, but not all. But does not list all of them, but does not, I can work on that a little bit. But essentially that's what we're saying, right? I mean, I'll make it sound better, but so what we want to say is that this list is not all inclusive and that there are other items, there are obviously other things we need to be concerned with but these were ones that I don't know, how do we want to say this? That we know that we believe need to be addressed in the near future?
Madam Chair, maybe some words to the effect of these are some upcoming significant expenditures to just give examples of the kind of infrastructure costs we have in front of us.
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that. Because I think that was kind of your thought, right, Troy? That these were some of the immediate concerns.
Yeah, they seemed very definable big ticket items as opposed to roads, which is perpetual, never ending, and not as identified.
Right. Okay. So something to that effect.
Okay, got it. I'll work
We
on
asked
it.
a lot of your wordsmithing, Melissa, so thank you.
That's okay. That's okay. All right, so back to me.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we should go down just to the highway because we did add those 2 bullets. I just want to make sure that people are, we removed the one that talks about the sand shed, like I said, but then we added these 2. And by we, I'm talking about the couple of us that met, over the summer. So, I mean, I think that developing a plan of maintenance is something that's pretty common. And I actually think they have some sort of list that sort of rates all the roads and has kind of but I think that should potentially be further developed and maybe communicated.
I've asked Commissioner Elder to produce a map that kind of has our county trunk system on it with a color coordinated kind of a estimated lifespan on the roads to help us visualize and then also gather how many miles we're going to be obligated to keep the trunk system within a 20 or 25 year life cycle.
So it sounds like they're actually working on both of these bullet points essentially. So I guess we can keep it in there because then we can say we did it.
Yeah.
He gets done next year.
Well, right, and I don't want you to feel like this project is going to take some time. So if we're checking things off as we go along, keep in mind that this plan, even when it's done, is going to continue to be amended. Done. So, yep,
never done. Yeah,
like probably more of a running checklist than it is a plan that we're going to always be able to, eventually check off all the boxes and be done with it by all means.
Plus, it keeps it on our radar so that if it's not happening, we can point back to the document saying, this is important. This is in our strategic plan where this is important that we do this. So,
yes, because just like the sand and salt shed, it's like we've put it into the budget for short-term borrowing, but that certainly doesn't mean that it's completed and we're not going to encounter a situation where we're going to consider reappropriating those funds to something else.
So should we put the salt shed back in?
I don't think if you put it in or you don't put it in, and I mean, just as an example on things can be changed.
Right.
So.
Okay.
I have a question on the emergency management. Were we going to go back up to that one?
Sure.
Because you have a little comment there.
Oh, well, it's too late. I mean, it's too late. We already spent the 600 grand, didn't
Well,
we?
that's
Didn't
what
we
I
officially?
thought. So I was confused. I was like, was this a previous comment or does Melissa
was.
know something I don't know?
Yeah, it was a previous comment before we
Okay.
went ahead and spent the 600 grand, and I just didn't delete it. I'm sorry.
No,
Um,
that's okay. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something. Alrighty. That was all I had.
Okay. All right. So then we get down to the discretionary services. So I don't know if this is a good place to segue, but I did actually, and then it's also on the agenda, so we should be fine talking about it. But I have made a lot of progress on the mandatory, non-mandated and mandated services document. I did email it to Clint so that he could share it tonight, so you guys could take a look. I'm not done by any means, but I have made a lot of progress. So I don't know if you want to talk about it now or if you want to just finish going through this and then we'll just go right into that document. I did put in the dollar figures with the items on this list to help. I think that, we've wondered, well, I mean, how much would it actually save us if we get out of the airport business or if we get out of the Simons recreation business? And so I did put those numbers in there. So,
You want me to
I
pull
get-
that up now, Supervisor Locke?
well, I was waiting to hear from Steve or Ingrid to know whether they,
I'm fine either
Yeah.
way. If you think it will help us as we go forward, then let's take a look at it now.
well, I mean, it doesn't really matter in just that, because I've already put how much UW Richland would cost us and how much, it's already in this document. If these are the things we're going to pull out as, and again, maybe we want to make a statement or reiterate the statement that these are just some of the discretionary services that we need to take a hard look at. And not, that we're not necessarily just picking on UW Richland and Simons and Tri-County. But maybe we leave them in here because we know that they're very vulnerable. But I would argue that extension is vulnerable as well.
When you're saying you added in the cost or like what the money savings would be if we weren't, how are you calculating that? Are you just doing that straight on like what we're putting into it now, or are you also looking at the revenue?
Right. Okay. No, I am strictly looking at what these entities cost us from the tax levy. So
Okay.
what the taxpayers are paying for these things to exist.
Question. But is this a net cost less the whatever revenues they take in?
No.
That's what I wasn't.
No,
I think you have to look at both. You have to look at both, right? I mean, for example, we say, okay, this is a discretionary or a non-mandated thing, but we actually make a profit at it.
So-
hypothetical. What if that was the case? Then we would probably say, gee, we should keep it.
So, Administrator Langrick, am I correct in saying that if these entities are making a profit, we wouldn't? So if, like, let's say Simons, for example, if they were making a profit per se, would we still be paying $34,000 from the tax levy?
No, we're subsidizing their operations.
Yeah,
right
these
now.
are subsidies. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. So same
So
thing with
all of
UW.
these-
So UW Richland, we are currently paying $50,000 for maintenance to keep the buildings afloat out there. They don't, any money they make, they don't give us anything back. I mean, there's arguments of how much UW Richland brings into our economy with the students and their jobs. I mean, that's not the conversation we're having right now.
Right.
And that was going to be my comment to what Steve said was, I think some of it's difficult to really quantify or put into numbers. Because I mean, similarly with like Tri-County Airport, there's a lot of arguments that can be made about the benefits and what it brings into a community there. But when you're looking at hard numbers, that's a little different. But I do think we have to have, I mean, I think this is super valuable just from looking at it from the monetary side of things. But I do think when we get into those discussions later about what do we cut and what don't we cut, we do have to look at both sides of it, don't we?
Right. Agree completely. Yeah. I mean, the money values that I'm putting in here right now are strictly talking about what our taxpayers have to pay in order for these entities to continue to exist in our county with the county's involvement. That's not to say that Simon's couldn't exist without our involvement. They would just have to come up with $34,291 per year, which probably, could they raise their rates and cover that amount? Probably. Is that what we should do? You know, do we want to raise the rates? Because that would, you know, make that facility too expensive for many of our poor community members. So, I mean, those are separate conversations though.
Right. This is really interesting. For example, animal control. I had no idea that we pay $10,525 for animal control. How did you find this?
I've been reading Wisconsin statutes a lot, and I've learned a lot, and I have a lot to go though, because some of it is hard to interpret, and I need to talk to some experts before I can, you know, like the ambulance. Like if you read that statute, it says may. It doesn't say you have to have an ambulance or emergency medical services. It says you may, and if you want to have one, you have to go through these certain steps. But I feel like there's got to be another statute somewhere that says that
Actually,
we have
Chapter
to decide.
66. Chapter 66 states that towns and municipalities are responsible to provide fire and ambulance protection to the
Okay,
township,
thank you.
but not the county, correct?
but not the county. But counties can have an ambulance service, which is referenced here on that.
Because I was
sheet there.
actually, and I forgot, when we were looking at the emergency medical or emergency part of the chapter 3, that was actually going to be one of my questions specifically for Carrie, because I assumed he'd already looked into this, was does that need to be included on there somewhere? That like, is that, because I know that's come up before, is that something that we're actually mandated to offer? And what are the other options we didn't?
For the ambulance service?
Right.
Yeah, no, we're not obligated to do it. I think we are obligated now to our citizens to provide that service, because we could, if we pull up now, then the towns are left with nothing. Who do
I'm
they
just
get?
saying that means
Go ahead,
that there are options for discussion then on other, which I know have already been brought up. And I'm not saying I agree with one side or the other. I just thought that that's interesting, and it should, because it was included under the statutorily required. And
So my opinion is that we just let the ambulance be for right now, because they are working, the Joint Ambulance Committee is working at separating from the county and becoming their own ambulance district. But it takes time, and that's in the first step was to acquire this building, so then they could eventually be on their own. And they don't have the financial support right now. So that's what they're working towards, and that's why we've created resolutions to leave the money in the joint ambulance account and not touch it and go towards general fund, to leave it there so they know if they can operate and be self-supporting.
Right, and you'll notice that the levy allocation is 0 for the ambulance service from our operational standpoint.
Yeah.
But however, we've obviously made capital investments as far as our bonding that we've done to buy this building, and so what I will say about this spreadsheet that I started is that there's many items like that where it may not be statutorily required, but we're already involved in it. So getting out of it is complicated. It's not impossible, but it's complicated. So I will better define all of those things as I move through this. One thing I just want to tell you about this particular document is the levy allocation numbers in there are the 2022 numbers before they were approved. So some of these were cut, so those numbers are not absolutely accurate, but they're close. So I did, so I don't know if you want to scroll through this at all and just note that, I mean, so one thing I'm doing is Googling, trying to find, and searching within the statutes, trying to find references to particular things. And I'm sure I'm missing some statutes from some places. So I do intend to actually talk to department heads in particular areas to further clarify what statutes they think are required. I did find it interesting that the Administrator Langrick had department heads fill out a form for the Finance Committee that asked them to define what services they provide that are mandated. And there was a couple of them or several of them that thought that what they're doing is mandated. But when I actually went to read the statutes, there's may language in there, and it doesn't say must or shall. There's may or can or could. So I thought that was interesting.
It does get complicated on the mays and cans. It also then kind of bleeds into the expectations of supervisory committees in the county board. And then there's also even things that are mandated. Of course, it's at what level do you need to provide those services that are even mandated? So
Absolutely. So that's what I was going to point out next was, if you go to the second tab, I pulled out HHS separately because Director Thorson did an amazing job of breaking down. And this kind of gets to what you were talking about, Mr. Carroll, was that this talks about what revenues they bring, what the total budget is, what revenues they bring in, and then how much we end up paying on a tax levy. And to me, what this particular table says very loudly is we're getting a lot of bang for our buck. Some of these programs we're putting in very little, and the state and federal government is putting in a lot, and and for that we get some pretty good programs. So I think that you're not incorrect. I think it is helpful to know what revenues are brought in by any particular department, and I can add that to the rest of the categories on that first spreadsheet. But I haven't had a chance to do that yet because no other department had it laid out as clearly as Director Thorson did, for sure. And the other thing I wanted to point out was, if you scroll down, Administrator Langrick, she had some very enlightening language. And so like under 24, where it says mental health and substance abuse services, counties have some flexibility to determine the type and levels of mental health services, but if appropriate services are not provided, there is a risk individuals needing more intensive or lengthy institutional care. And of course, institutional placements are very, very expensive. So like Clint said, yes, we could cut back on some of these services, but then we probably would end up paying more in the end because we'd end up with more people with Chapter 51 placements, which we have no choice but to do, and those can be very costly. So I think I'll have Administrator Langrick email this to all of you, but I'll make sure I put draft all over it, and just understand that it's a work in progress. But I wanted you to see what I had so far.
Yeah,
I know.
Betsy,
Go ahead, Mr. Carroll, and then we'll do Mr. Seaver.
okay. Yes, that spreadsheet's awesome, and I've been trying to dive into the budget worksheets to try to find similar information, and I have a heck of a time. So you're gonna have to give us your secrets, Melissa, on how you dig these numbers out, and I'm looking forward to learning more about how to find these kind of things in our budget.
It's very time consuming, I'll tell you that.
Mr. Severson? Oh, sorry, Melissa, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. Carrie, go ahead.
Trying to find, I think I found it. So there was a time, so when you're talking health human services, I know Ingrid was probably around there during this time, but we kind of scaled back on our funding towards health and human services and towards mental health and towards this stuff because they weren't mandated, and we cut a bunch of funding, and then I ended up our institutional placement cost skyrocketed. We're paying way too much money on that. So then we started, I think that was back in 2017. We were at like 1.4 million. And then we started giving some money back and started instituting some of these programs that were not mandated, but were helpful. And then that reduced our costs down at like another 200,000. And then it was kind of steady until 2020 when it really shot up. So if we like start eliminating some of that stuff, it could be costing us more in the end.
I agree. And I do think as we move through this, that we want to have those kinds of conversations with the department heads who have the expertise to understand what the situation is. Of course, there's always that difficult part where, you're asking the person who it's in their best interest to say,
Exactly.
it's a little bit complicated, but I think we have some really good employees that work for us that are willing to tell us, you know, what is really necessary and what isn't really necessary. And then at the end of the day, of course, it's up to us. But you know, I think one of the ways that I'll probably try to get at some of this is just to kind of look around us too, and at other counties to see how many, you know, what other counties are doing, just to see how it all compares, to get an idea of if we're on target or if we're too staff heavy in a particular area or too much money going to a particular area or not. But that's where I am right now.
Well,
So
Melissa, I just want to say thank you a lot thank you very, very much for your hard work on this.
And I'm not guaranteeing
some
that
of
there's
us
not
to do
mistakes.
some homework.
There's,
What's that?
I'm not going to guarantee there's not mistakes. Like I said, this is very drafty right now.
Well,
Um,
I think we had already talked about how there is really nothing like this. I mean, you can't find information like this even in other counties, like a list. So when you're the prototype for it, Melissa, there's bound to be some mistakes, but it's awesome. So thank you.
So I guess getting back to the chapter 3, which is, I think, you know, we just need to determine, do we want to leave the language in there about the cost and I did try to make it really clear that that's levy. And again, like UW Richland, sure, it's $50,000 a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, except that we've put, and Administrator Langrick, you probably could tell, maybe you remember better than I do, but I know we've put a few roofs on in the last couple years. I mean, we've actually invested quite a bit more than just our 50,000 per year out at the campus.
Yes, the overall name of the game with what we're considering non-mandated services is that operationally, annually, we don't have a huge amount of an investment that we're doing. It's the infrastructure costs, like
Right.
assignments that we just put a new roof on, and we help with replastering the inside of the pool. There's work to be done on the locker rooms. The campuses, of course, are many buildings with a very aged heating system, as well as deteriorations in the fire suppression, fire detection systems. The list goes on and on. Same thing can be said about our fairgrounds. Fair operations is really only $15,000 a levy, but keeping up with the infrastructure, grandstands, lights, sheds, all those types of things is, and the same thing with ambulance. So we're going to acquire an ambulance garage. Our operations are projected about a zero impact on levy, but we know buying this building already that within the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to have to put a new roof on it to the tune of several hundred thousands, and then truck replacements and all those other things. So it's good to see the operational expense to have that, but that at the same time too, to make sure that people don't lose a track on, well, it's not the operations necessarily isn't the whole story. It's the how you're housing these operations.
So is it appropriate to then leave that language that I've added? I mean, I could, like under UW Richland, I probably want to not say what I said about food service quite in the way that I said it, but because they did, you know, I mean, to her credit, Angie at food service has you know, been able to break even and not have any tax levy dollars put towards that food service in 20 some years. But then 2020 happened, and a little bit in this year too, I believe, you know, we're going to have to put towards, you know, the county providing food service for the university, which, you know, does that make sense? So anyway, so I mean, I'm going to say that I think it's helpful to have the language added after each one with the cost to the levy plus the capital improvements, unless you feel like we should also talk about their revenues at this point, you know, talk about what they bring to, do we want to add language about what they bring to?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think these cost figures should be in there, but maybe reworded a bit to point those things out, like Melissa is saying, that you know, operational costs paid for by levy is just part of it, and that capital costs and just to give it a little more context. But I think it is helpful to see at least that much in there.
Should I try to add a more to that first paragraph under discretionary services, like to define that
No, you were at the right spot, Clint. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, right there. So in that first paragraph, I could expound on that and say something to the effect of, there are costs, so, annual costs for the taxpayers are listed after each item. However, there are many other factors to consider, including what revenues and what's the right word? Revenues and amenities they bring to our county, or
Madam Chair, yeah, yes, I think reminding everyone that it's not just money, that there are amenities, quality of life things that these bring that hard to put a dollar on, but they still add to the attractiveness of the community. So it's hard to calculate that, but I agree that it should be pointed out somewhere.
Perhaps in that sentence right before priorities and core values, you could say something like, should consider the, what you had said about operational costs, plus capital improvements, as well as, possible revenue or value that it adds to the community. Something like that right there, like a short, brief statement right before the priorities and core values. I mean, I don't think we need to belabor this. I feel like most people know, like, when we're looking at things like Simons and UW Richland, I mean, obviously we want to consider what that brings to our community. I do feel like the priority here, though, is looking at costs at this point. I mean, for the purposes of this document.
all right, I'll add a sentence just to highlight that we are looking at their revenues, that their expenses, but we will also obviously look at what they add to our community. I'll figure something out to write in there and bring it back. Is that okay?
Yeah. Looked like you had added just a couple of things to UW Richland. Blue.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think the potential partnership with SWTC is sort of the elephant in the room. I mean, I think that's what everyone thinks of as a obvious first choice for collaboration. So I think we just thought, why not just say it instead of dancing around it. And then advocating the UW Richland to be an independent campus, not a satellite. I mean, obviously that's a pie in the sky thing that, we're not going to have a whole lot of leverage with the UW system. But whatever. And then the get out of county food service, which is not stated very well. That was just me writing a note from what someone said, is really, why are we providing food service for the UW system? It really makes no sense why that's under us and not under the UW. That seems like a service they should be providing for their staff and students.
I'm not sure how we arrived at that. I know part of the budgetary aspect in which Angie, though, does consider is making meals yet for the meal sites for the nutrition
But don't we
program.
contract that? But that's a contracted service. That's not, she could
Yeah.
still be contracted to do that.
That comes through HHS, right? That's separate, isn't it?
It is.
Mhm. Yep.
So, I mean,
Yep.
even if she was UW, that doesn't mean the UW couldn't make a little money off of. I mean, it's a little bit weird that we're paying
Yeah, part of
ourselves.
our food service
meals.
budget really is kind of an expenditure on an HHS line and revenues that they have to offset a little bit through the state for what they can claim through it. So it's kind of a trickle down budget thing of where you really don't, the cost of the actual service gets kind of passed and spread around through two departments.
Melissa,
Yeah, yeah.
I just to your comment. I'm being kind of smart though, but paying ourselves is the name of the game here in the county. We're always paying ourselves to do something. Always.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So do we want to leave this in about food service or take it out? I mean, I don't have a I mean, I think we were already picking on UW Richland enough that, and it's sort of understood that food service, if we drop UW Richland, obviously we wouldn't be investing in their food service either.
Yeah,
mean-
well, the food service is kind of, you know, like we'd mentioned, is our operation, our employees. I guess I would say that rather, you know, getting out of the food service would be to evaluate the appropriateness and our long-term benefits of having our own food service versus contracting.
So maybe we take that one out for now then?
I'm certainly okay with that.
We did something a few years back. I don't know if you remember, Ingrid, when there was talk about cutting the budget for the food nutrition sites. And I don't know what we went from there. Like, I thought we were already contracting out with somebody to make the food, and then we went to UW because it was cheaper. There was something
Remember, I don't know.
there was
if that
something there, and I
on
can't remember.
Yes, I think it was down to a price thing that Angie could do it for a couple dollars cheaper. I think the
I
price.
can't remember who
went
the
up a
provider
couple-
was.
Yeah, if it was Sunshine Cafe, I can't remember. But then with the two, I know the new nutrition plan that we just put into effect, the last resolution or maybe the meeting before. I think there's more vouchers and such that are going out as well with the meal sites. So it would be a good time to reevaluate exactly how many meals are getting produced out through the food services.
So leave it in there?
Yeah, that's.
Well,
I was
it
gonna
has
ask.
it has to
So
be.
are you
Yeah, it has to be evaluated, just like.
Okay,
all
so
of our other
evaluate the
non-nutrition.
long-term feasibility of running county food service?
You nailed it right there.
Okay. Is running the right word? Operating would be a better word, right?
That does sound a little bit more.
Operating county food service. Okay, I will leave that in there. What about advocate to have UW Richland be an independent campus, not a satellite?
How realistic is that?
I mean, the UW system isn't going to, I mean, I guess we could send a strongly worded letter to UW system saying, I guess, Troy, what's your feeling on this? I think this was part of what you were thinking, that we need to advocate more strongly for our own position with UW Richland.
Yeah, I don't remember putting that in there. To me, that
You
would feel
didn't
like
put
it's
that in
strange.
there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
so-
added it, but it was based on language that you had.
Yeah, my intention was to find some purchase, some leverage, some way to advocate. Because when we were going through this, there was almost nobody picking up the phone, no response. To this day, I'm not sure I can tell you how many students they have over there. Some level of advocacy to change that dynamic was the initial intent. And aside from putting there be annoying as all heck, I don't know what else to put it in there, but how else you get their attention, I guess. I don't think that sounds realistic, candidly. And
Either.
I think I had in there. I think we had somewhere endeavor to have a post-secondary institution if possible, because I think that we heard that in our city comprehensive planning and all over the place. Now, whether that's UWP, I guess there's only one other reasonable entity there, so I don't know. We're kind of saying what we're not saying if you just say that, but there was a lot of desire in the community for that, if it's realistic or not.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Madam Chair, maybe words more like explore instead of advocate, just explore, and it doesn't even have to mention being a satellite, just explore UW Richland as another, a different educational venue, something like that.
Would that be included in develop scenarios of use of these buildings in the event of relationship with UW system ends, including a potential partnership with SWTC? Is that kind of included in that, or?
Yeah, really.
So should I delete this bullet?
I'm wondering, Troy, you mentioned that you were just trying to get at pursuing more advocacy on the part, or more involvement, essentially, like taking some ownership of campus. I mean, if we're going to continue in the current situation that we're in, do you think some sort of language to that effect would be appropriate here, or just delete?
I
Because as you
I-
said, it's been, sorry, go ahead.
I make a comment, I guess.
Yeah,
So the UW University of Wisconsin system, they're renting those buildings from us, and if we start, my feeling is if we start saying that we want to be independent campus and we want to do this and that, they're going to say, hey, go find your own professors to teach your classes, go offer your own classes, and now that becomes a cost now for us as a county to do.
Right.
Like, who's going to come in here? So they're offering, hey, we'll have a campus here with our UW name on it and provide you these professors and provide education to your community people. But if you don't want us, we'll pull out. And then who are we going to get? Blackhawk Tech, Southwest Tech. You're not going to get another UW thing because UW is statewide.
Yeah, if I can just chime in with that, right now with our current model, as Supervisor Severson said, we own it, they use it for free. If they were paying us rent, we'd have like a revenue flow, which we know we don't. But we're kind of in a situation of being a landlord. We own the property, but we're not owning it in a capacity to make a profit or have a revenue flow. So we're really kind of owning it to subsidize the cost of secondary education out here. As far as our current model is set up in not having a tenant pay us a revenue to use those buildings, UW system, to their defense, does an amazing job of investing into those buildings, probably beyond what they're supposed to. The idea is that the infrastructure of the building, how it's kind of visualized. If you pick the building up and shook it, everything that stayed fastened, bolted, or painted onto fastened or bolted, would be the county's responsibility. Well, they go above and beyond that with helping out with painting a lot of their labor forces, cutting the grass, mowing the trails. I mean, they're, as far as our model is going, I don't think we're going to find a better tenant for that. So coming back around where it's, if we're finding a different educational institute and we're still going to be a landlord without having a revenue flow, doesn't, financially, we're going to be in the same situation where it's going to be a challenge for us to own those buildings without having some type of other offsetting revenues to continue upkeeping it to its current level, but then also catching up on the many years of deferred maintenance on the buildings.
Thank you for wording that.
I don't know if I did a very good job. It sounded kind of mumbly.
Madam Chair,
That's the point across I was trying to make.
Mr. Langer, can I ask him a question, Madam Chair?
yes.
So if you go down a little bit to that next bulleted paragraph there, when we're talking about expenses, is the $50,000 all we pay, or do the utilities expenses out there get charged to the general fund somewhere that I just am not aware of in a line item? And the same thing with that last bullet about 50% of the janitorial cost. I didn't think we were paying either of those things.
To the best of my knowledge, we cut a $50,000, not a check, but we have a $50,000 account that they submit payments against, and that is used mostly against maintenance projects right now that Mickey kind of drives from out there.
So do Ag and Extension in that building, do they pay utility expenses for the building that they're in? Or is that also covered by the UW?
I don't know that off the top of my head. If they get housed out there for free and utilities falls to UW, or if we pay as part of that, I don't know that off the top of my head. And
so, Troy, I'm assuming that these bulleted points, you got them from the rental agreement that you read. I can't believe you read that whole thing. But I think what's happening is, even though it says that we're supposed to do it, I don't think that we are. So that's something else to consider when we're talking about what Clint is saying, would we get as good a deal from another tenant? And so do we need to change our tone more to what do we do to have a stronger position with getting UW-Platteville to put their money where their mouth is, really? I mean, they keep saying that they want this as a campus and that this is important to them, but I haven't seen much actual movement on that.
Yeah, you're only getting a deal if there's warm bodies in the building. So it's really a double-edged sword. If in fact they go under and close, it doesn't matter how much money you're saving from what the contract said from 40 years ago, because now you have an empty liability sitting on your hands.
Right.
So I don't know how to tease that out necessarily. Right now it feels good, but if they go under, then you're not really saving anything.
Right. So your position was, we aren't saying that we don't want them, but what we're saying is that if they're not going to be there, we need to be prepared and have a plan and have an idea of what we will do so that it doesn't become a huge financial black hole for us.
Yeah,
Exactly.
advocate for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yes.
All the signals seem to be saying they can't get enough students out there, and that the Tommy Thompson was talking about 2-year colleges and all these sort of things. Prepare for that. In the meantime, yeah, support the institution, but make some noise to figure out. I guess candidly, my concern is, well, I don't know. That's not fair. Be prepared. Yeah, that's how it is. Advocate for answers and with your partner, and be prepared for one of two scenarios, success or them to pull out.
So potentially, could we change the language to advocate to UW Platteville to do some serious investing in student recruitment or something like that, like to just say that, because that's really at the end of the day, that's what it is. Either they get students there and everyone's successful, or they don't and the whole thing fails, right? I mean, it's all up to how many students we get there.
Did they improve their recruitment strategy at all this last year? Because I know the year before there was like none.
Well, they kept talking about and doing it and improving it, but I don't think it's worked yet.
So I don't know I can just speak from what I know from the meetings with UW Extension. They've brought on again a recruiter now that I believe is designated for our campus in Baraboo versus all three. Our enrollments, unfortunately, have not picked up from the pandemic to the best of my knowledge. I think that the last report there was a total of 70 students that are there in some type of capacity, 30 new enrollees, like first year students. And right now there's still concerns across the entire kind of a Platteville, between Baraboo and between Richland and down in Platteville of enrollments. So there's troubles across the entire UW with lower enrollments, as Troy had mentioned with us too. We're having the effects now of reduced population and birth rates brought on by the Great Recession. So there's going to be less students graduating from high school, less enrollment opportunities. So all those things kind of play in effect, where it's just the current model it's going to be very hard to believe that model is going to arrive back in having student enrollments in the hundreds. On top of that, even if it were to get to 200, 400, that's not going to still, from our perspective, we're still going to have to pay money for those to keep those buildings up. That doesn't arrive at an increased revenue flow for us unless Angie is having an amazing amount of cash flow that's coming through the cafeteria. So whether there's 30 new enrollees out there or 300 enrollees, we're still stuck in a situation where a $50,000 annual operating expenses to keep up with maintenance is not going to cut it to keep up with the deferred maintenance on those buildings.
Oof.
So coming back around then to advocate if the UW is an independent campus and not a satellite, I'm not sure if, it would be hard for me to believe that that's in the UW's scheme of things. I mean, you can advocate for it all we want, and that's okay, knowing that it's not going to be a reality. I think their position too, though, is that we certainly cherish it. So, I think they're wanting to try to keep a service provided out there for post-secondary education. So if we can continue working with them on maybe advocating to have continue or advocate to work with UW on options to sustain post-secondary education in the community or something like that, or I don't know. I'm not sure what to tell you there. It's going to be a challenge, but like Troy said, we can hope for the best, but at the same time, we're certainly in a position where we're starting to evaluate what other types of plan A's, plan B's can be put in a case of emergency, and we get a notification that they are in fact going to wind down, which we we've not heard that, that we have a plan B of other options we can explore with it. Because if we do have to just shut down and then mothball the place and turn the systems off, it's going to be a very, a loss of depreciation on our assets, as well as trying to get the systems turned back on might be a dream as well.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I make a suggestion on how we could potentially maybe handle this? I think on bullet point number 4, I think definitely, including a potential partnership with Southwest Tech, or should I put the Blackhawk Tech in there? Or just with a technical college, how about?
Yeah, maybe just leave it at technical college. And I mean, like you said, that seems like one of the biggest obvious ones that has been being discussed, but obviously we're going to have to think about other options besides that as well.
Well, I mean, from a secondary education standpoint, your choices are what?
Okay, they're pretty limited,
college
yeah.
Or UW, right? So, and
Correct.
then I would change 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th bullet point to say advocate with UW Platteville to prioritize enrollment and investment in the campus. And then the last one would be evaluate the long-term feasibility of operating county food service. And just that way we've sort of encompassed everything we've talked about, I think.
Like those.
May I
Other-
offer just one more thought before we move on?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think it would be Southwest Tech. If you don't want to list them, I believe they are geographically bound. Blackhawk doesn't come further west than like Monroe or some of those. They're bound by the CETA districts. So whether you list them or not, it would, I think, have to be Southwest Tech, just as a thought. But somewhere down the road, put this on your to-do list. I think you have partners who would love to see you succeed in that space, in those buildings. The Cincinnati Dominicans, if you know their place in Grant County, have been bringing through partners for the last year. Delta 3 Engineering, Southwest Cap, the county, walking through the facilities and getting a thought of what to use with their facilities. So a little more awkward with you all since you have a tenant there. But if the time comes, we'd be very happy to kind of rally the troops, so to speak, and bring folks and do a walkthrough and a charrette to figure out what makes sense. Or we could also do it clandestinely if there's any interest there. But I think you'd have lots of supporters looking to help you succeed. So I think kind of keeping that in mind is part of the next step of this might be valuable.
Do we want to just add that? I mean, at this point, I don't think it's a secret to anyone, UW, Platteville, or anyone that we're concerned, and they're concerned, right?
I would like to see that added, because I think that was kind of my point. Like, if a secondary education is not going to be an option, then we need to be able to look at other options.
So how would I could put that as the final bullet point, but what exactly should I say?
Well, or do you want to include it in scenarios for the use of these buildings? Because including a potential partnership with Southwest Tech or whatever.
Or what did you call it, Troy?
Yeah, I think charrette was the term I used, but it can start with a scratch pad by your desk. Oh, here's an idea I saw somewhere. Let me write it down. So whatever that easy capture idea is, and then I think if you just have in there, begin exploring ideas for a use afterwards.
So I was just going to say the bullet on this page, the 4th one down, the develop scenarios for the use of these buildings in the event the relationship with UW system ends. I mean, to me, that's the one that my eyes keep going back to again is the priority to develop plan B, plan C, plan D. So that's
okay. So
that's
it's
the one that I plan. I plan on pointing to that one often.
Right. So within that bullet, we could bring people in to sort of brainstorm ideas to look at those buildings. Okay.
I think so.
So do we want to leave the language in there about us paying utilities if I don't think we do, and us paying janitorial costs if I don't think we do? Should I delete those, or what do you want me to do with that?
Well, what do you mean by delete? Do you mean delete the actual bullet points or your comments?
No, delete the bullet points, because if we're not paying utilities, then we don't want to talk about.
So don't mention that it's required.
Yes. Well, that and just
Although, but doesn't that come up Well, no, that was specific to our rental agreement with UW, correct? So if we were gonna explore other options, that would not be a binding.
Right. Plus,
Yeah,
if
I
it,
don't
you
know
know,
what
he's
age
bringing him
we're
up
going.
as, yeah, and he's bringing him up as, hey, this is extra money that we're paying, but I don't think we actually are. So I don't, we shouldn't count it against this agreement since we aren't
Yeah,
in fact.
if it's not true, we shouldn't leave it in.
So
Okay.
I'll leave it in until we can confirm that. Clint, do you have a way, or who should I talk to confirm whether we pay that stuff or not?
I can check and see if we have a different line item that there's billings going against for it, but I think right now everything is included in like this next year, the $50,000 that we're sending out there is what I think it goes against. I can investigate though. I have access to the system.
So am I correct in saying that we get a utility bill like in the courthouse and then the county clerk divvies it up and like divides it among the departments? Is that how that happens?
And for the courthouse, I think everything comes out of the maintenance, just out of the maintenance building bill.
Okay, I was thinking, well, phone, and maybe it's phone I was thinking of that gets divvied up among departments.
Telephone, yeah, that one gets apportioned. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so so are you saying that you're like very sure I should delete them because you are very sure that we do not pay those? Or do you want to wait until you confirm it?
I can look and confirm, but I'm thinking it's just kind of a fungibility thing where we're sending them money and they pick up bits and pieces of it, and we just have maintenance monies that we're kind of spending out there. So I
Okay,
can look and confirm, but
okay.
it's not ringing a bell.
All right, so moving on, I don't think we added any language or, there's one comment under Simon's, we do have, we think we have an employee discount we must be paying for the Simons Recreation Complex for employees. So again, I think the idea was that, if we were no longer associated with Simons, we would have to pay, or, that if we were going to still give our employees access to Simons, it would cost us more, I think was the point of that comment. But that's the only comment under Simons. So I don't know if that's relevant, if we just ignore it. I mean, obviously, if we ever severed our ties with Simons, we would evaluate. We could decide whether we still want to give that to our employees as a benefit or not. Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
so Tri-County Airport, it's the money it costs improvements. Didn't add anything to that.
We're going to spend
Pine Valley, they don't ask us for operating. I'm sorry.
I was going to say with the airport, so we're kind of crossed the threshold on the drainage improvement, the $9.5 million project. So that's going to be 100,000, a little
Sorry,
bit
Clint,
more.
you're cutting out.
Is going to come out of ARPA funds right now. Can you hear me? Hello?
I think it's her connection.
I can hear you.
You can
Yeah,
hear me?
I heard
Okay.
you just fine.
Oh, yep. Oh,
No. Just you.
can you hear me now, Melissa? Can anybody else hear me?
I can hear you, Clint. You're fine.
I can.
Was it me that's cutting out?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's Melissa.
It was Melissa.
We'll have to come back to that in a minute. Hopefully she picks up. Loading. Hmm. She should maybe jump off and try.
She's probably got a higher demand in her area for internet at this time of night. So that's probably why it's kind of a weak signal.
Melissa, can you hear us?
I'm calling.
Wonder if we chat.
Yeah, somebody
Okay.
just check downstairs. Somebody might have started watching Netflix and chewing up your bandwidth.
Take them off. They're video gaming.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, yes.
Hold on.
Can you hear us is the question. Take that as a no. Well,
Are you typing?
maybe she's going to chat. Oh, Cheryl says she can hear good. Well, guys, but she said she was going to call in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give her a few minutes.
It is.
Can you guys hear me?
Yay, there she is. Yes.
Okay, hold on. I gotta mute some things and. All right. I'm not gonna be able to see you guys, but I can still at least hear you. Can you hear me?
We decided somebody
Yes,
must
we
be
can
watching
hear.
Netflix in your house.
Well, I should have used my other computer, and actually I should have used my landline instead of my cell phone, which is on Wi-Fi right now. But we'll hope this works.
So just very briefly, I was saying our Tri-County Airport project, we're doing the drainage ditch, which is going to be the $9.5 million, 10% covered federal level, 5% state, 5% local, that we divide between us and Sauk County, and Cardinal Glass is chipping onto it. So it's about a $100,000 investment. With that, though, receiving the federal funds would say that then the owner or owners have to continue and operate that as is for the next 20 years. I asked if we would be able to defer out and leave Sauk County with ownership, and if that would require us to pay the federal money back. And it was kind of thought that, well, might not, but that's not really being terribly the best partner. But long story short is there's still capital expenses that go along with the $27,500. So that's kind of the same situation again of a non-mandated service where operationally it doesn't cost us a whole lot, but then our capital infrastructure and liability stays out there. Same thing with Pine Valley. Our operational expense is projected to be in the black again if things smooth out and we can get staffing levels back to a normal. We're projecting approximately $300,000 potentially that they're going to be above, that they can then, like this 2022 year, that they're going to be able to defer back to general fund to subsidize our general operations. But keep in mind, though, that there's $1.5 million in debt service that we're paying for the new facility out there.
So is there anything I should add to that, what's already there? Can you guys hear me?
I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay.
You mentioned, I mean, Troy or Clint, did you think that we need to add on the big project?
I'm sorry, can I have you say that again?
You mentioned the projects that we're partway through or getting into, I guess I should say. Were you saying that that should be added in there, or is that just covered under?
No, that's just another thing of when we're evaluating it, we have an operational cost, but understanding that it's the capital improvements and the liabilities there that's of a greater issue.
Melissa, you still there?
I am. I'm gonna switch over to my landline right now, but I'm definitely still listening.
Okay.
The bullet with Pine Valley, where it says monitor return on investment of the facility and have revenue cover 50% of the debt service tied to the 2016 improvements. That would be about a $750,000 piece of money that we would be allocating to kind of meet that. In terms of, well, I get, no, there's multiple bond sales, and I don't have those in front of me. But if we're going to use their excess revenues against those debt services, that's not inappropriate. It's just how we're currently budgeting. That's going to be a greater impact then into other levy subsidized services as a consideration point.
Yeah, so the second bullet point was one that we added this summer. And I'm not sure if my point of view on that has changed after going through the budget process we just went through. I mean, I still, especially since there is a resolution, or not a resolution, there is some document somewhere that says Pine Valley was going to pay back some of its own debt service. Do you recall the language? Was that just a PowerPoint presentation that was given when they convinced people to do the bond, or convinced supervisors to do the bond? But
I think
somewhere
so.
it was said that.
Yeah, I think I recall that, seeing that in a presentation by, if it was Whiffley, and that was underneath the context of, yes, if we should be making profits enough where we could put it against the debt service. I don't think it was included, like you mentioned, in an actual resolution, but that was set as a discussion point on advocating for going forward with the project.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to me, and I think to Sean, I think he was one person who was definitely interested in having this appear in this document.
Sure.
Is it feels like if that's what they said to sell the project, then maybe we should be trying to make sure that happens. But I understand your point, which is if they pay debt, they do have money to pay their debt service, but then we aren't putting that into our operating funds, and we would have to come up with additional monies to cover operational expenses, correct?
Right. The way that we're currently doing business, we're taking their overages and bringing it back to the general fund to fund, well, just to fund general operations. So if we put that towards debt service to reduce our tax burden, there's nothing wrong with that, and that may be appropriate. It just adds to the gap that we're going to have to fill going forward into 2023.
Could we change the language on that bullet point to say consider the possibility, and so that, you know, as we move forward with however we decide to deal with our financial issues, that be something we consider? Instead of saying that we're going to do it, say that we will consider doing it, so that it's on the table and kind of in our consciousness?
Yeah, I would say rather than saying and have revenue cover 50% of the debt, if you said and consider having revenue cover, would give you more debate in the table versus, you know, this is something we kind of signed ourselves up for on adopting this strategic plan or having to go back and change it. So, but if it's something that everybody's strongly about and that's the path we want to take, then I guess I would leave it as have it. So it's going to stick out more and it gives more justification when we reach the budget table again and we want to either do it or to not do it.
Madam Chair, what do you think?
I mean, I think we should have some sort of language in there. So if it's better to say consider, I put that in so that we still have that there.
Okay, so what I wrote then was monitor return on investment of the facility and consider having revenue cover a percentage of debt service tied to the 2016 improvements as per the terms of bond sale 3/1/16. Does that seem reasonable?
With that language, I would include it, you know, I'd be including it as a consideration point, a lever to be added to the decision process, but, but not necessarily having to pull in an account for it. So it'd be factored in.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm not financial enough. This looks like a wash. Either they're helping pay down debt with the revenues, or they're filling gaps in our operating. It doesn't sound like either way makes much difference. What am I missing?
If we were using it to offset debt service, we would then be reducing our debt levy that we would be putting out on property taxes. So we'd have less tax money coming in as a revenue, is how I would see it.
Madam Chair?
Yeah,
So one important thing to consider is the fact that we are almost at our max of borrowing because of this, mostly because of this Pine Valley bonding that we did of the $20 million. And so if we had them pay more of that off, we would have more flexibility to do our bonding that we need to do for other projects that are just, that are on the horizon. For example, the radio tower project. So I think it is important it's an important distinction. Yeah, we do have a problem with our operating fund. We do need more money in our operating fund. However, we've almost reached capacity on what we can borrow for, and yet we still have all these huge things looming on the horizon. And because we have this $20 million still hanging out there with Pine Valley, it just really limits what else we can do to address our infrastructure issues.
well, my question is, are there other things that we should be looking at in here? I mean, we have these bullet points, but those of you who are more in the know, is there something else that we should be looking at? I mean, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to have this discussion. I know we've talked about doing this capital improvements plan, but I'm just wondering if this is comprehensive of the goals that we're trying to accomplish here, or if there are other ways of looking at or addressing this problem that we're not including.
Madam Chair, are you talking about with Pine Valley specifically?
Pine Valley specifically.
So, Madam
Well,
Chair, I would say that I feel like this is not an exhaustive or extensive list, but this is getting us on the path to helping us make decisions on our continued investment in Pine Valley.
I want to make one comment here. So just realize now that Bethel Nursing Home in Viroqua is closing down.
Yeah, I
So-
heard that.
So, and Vernon County still has a nursing home, county nursing home. So if Bethel's closing, what other ones are closing? And that may give us an opportunity at some point in time to have people that we need. We just need to staff it.
Have what?
We could have more patients essentially, but we just would need to have people to staff it, which then would help us.
Which is, of
in our
course, the
return.
problem right now.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, as far as the wording on bullet 2, can we not just word it so we preserve our flexibility on that instead of have revenue cover 50? Maybe consider having revenue.
That's
Cover
what we were
50%.
discussing, and I believe Melissa was putting that in there.
I
Okay.
did. Yep. The sentence now reads, and consider having revenue cover a percentage of the debt service.
Okay.
So I got rid of the 50% and just said a percentage, and I said, instead of have revenue, I said consider having revenue.
Okay, good.
All right. Is there anything else?
I would just like to say, and this is a side note, and I don't have all of the information, but I feel like this particular problem is one of the reasons why I was saying that we need to make sure when we go on and make a capital improvements plan that we really have some experts giving information, because I feel like this particular investment, we know that there are some difficulties associated with that. And so I just want to be careful when we're moving forward with some of the plans we make, that we're really trying to be as well informed as possible about the implications.
Agree.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I agree also. In fact, some of my self-education, I talked to Carol Worth a little bit about this whole question on our bond rating, and my understanding is it had much more to do with some of the surprise placement costs in HHS during that period of time that caused concern. It wasn't so much Pine Valley. And so I think we need to make sure, like you say, that we've talked to people who know most directly the facts on some of these issues, what the real story is.
Yeah. Okay. Guess that brings us to is this the last one? Capital facilities performance metrics?
I don't think we really had any changes in that section. I mean, I did delete the salt shed since that was already happening. There was one comment that we had this summer, which was we need to create a goal that uses comparison metrics with other counties, but I think we've kind of done that up above in other, well, I guess we did it in our plan. We did add that, you know, in the chapter 2, so maybe we do want to say something about how we're performing compared to other counties. I don't know if that's something we feel is important.
Madam Chair, that was me bringing some of that up, and again, it's a terminology thing for me. To me, metrics means ways of measuring, and some of these bullets here are more of a, you know, yes no thing. Either we do it or we don't. But I think we also need to recognize there are comparison, benchmark, looking at how we compare with other counties. To me, those are more like metrics, and it'd be nice to capture a little bit of that somewhere.
Hey, did we talk about that a little bit? I feel like in one of the earlier chapters, we mentioned comparing to other counties, but maybe it wasn't specific to metrics.
Yeah, it was in
Well, we
chapter 2, and
did.
it was in a specific section of it, not like just an overall.
I guess when you say that, Steve, like what are you, give me an example of what we would be looking at or looking for with another county with some of these things.
Well, okay, so again, what are the most useful and informative metrics? I'm not sure, but you would do things like I don't know, like dollars per day per inmate or something like that for sheriff and jail.
I think I understand what you're saying. But
Yeah.
I feel like with this section, because we want to actually create a capital facilities improvement plan, I feel like our performance metrics or even our points right here, it's, in my opinion, it's okay to leave them fairly general or to not have them fully fleshed out, because that's the intent of the later, more well-researched document.
Well, Troy, can you chime in? Because this is, you know, this is what I've been trying to get a handle on. And what do you feel like metrics is the right word there?
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna wimp out and agree with both of you. I see exactly what you're getting at, Steve, and I think it's valuable to have that in there. I'm not sure you'll know what the metrics are until you move ahead a little further. So I wouldn't risk getting hung up on the document to try to get every metric in. The other thing
I agree with that.
The metric is the thing you want to measure, and the target is what you're shooting for. So that may be a really good work program for your committees, who are going to know the day-to-day intimate details. I think that's a very interesting example, and I know it was just an example, but an alcoholic substance abuse inmate versus a violent criminal versus a mental health. You know, I'm out of my depth, but you know, those are all very, not just complicated, but complex things. And so that, for that reason, I wouldn't try to get that in here. I would urge or require your department heads to really figure out what those measurable things are. And that can be the work plan piece.
Yeah.
All right, so did you want more specific language in here then, Steve? Or do you think we just address that later with our work plan once we have a more
I
comprehensive?
think it can be in the work plan. That's fine.
Okay, I think that concludes that, correct, Melissa?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Let me flip back to my agenda here. I don't know. I think our next step would be to start, well, it'll be nice to get more input from department heads and departments. I think before we really move too much forward on the work plan, would you guys agree?
Yeah, the next step would be to review all the information we get from our committees and department heads, is what you're saying?
Yeah, so maybe we need to look at when we schedule our next meeting, just making sure, let's see. November 19th was the deadline that we gave them. So maybe looking at the week right after that.
Is that Thanksgiving?
Oh my gosh, yes it is.
I mean, early in the week would be okay with me, but obviously not later in the week.
Yeah, let's avoid Thanksgiving Day, shall we?
I'm on
Is
vacation.
anybody
that week
traveling
also.
that week?
What's that?
I'm on vacation. I'm on vacation that week. Deer hunting again.
Any chance you could meet us again like this, Carrie?
What day is the 19th?
Well, the 19th
That's
is
a
a Friday,
Friday.
so we'd be looking at the next week, like Monday or Tuesday maybe. Wait, is that Tuesday? We don't have a county board meeting then, do we?
No, we don't know.
Not
No
in
county board
November.
in November. I wanted to take a break. We worked really hard on our budgets. And so this is our.
And so now I'm telling you, you can't take a break. We're gonna have another meeting. So forget that. What do you guys think? You want to try to do Monday, Tuesday there? Or go on to
I'm
the
okay
next
with,
week?
Works
I
for
just-
me.
Okay, I'm just worried about, we got some things to do yet in December. And December is not going to be any more fun with scheduling, I can tell you that. So, how does that Monday look?
I'm with
When?
me.
How long are you gone, Carrie? Are you gone that whole week?
Yeah, but I'm gonna be home. It's just as long as you have it like you did tonight. Except
Well-
it could be earlier this time because now it gets dark at 4:30. So if you had it like at
Well,
5:15, 5:30.
That was going to be my next question. Do we really want to do another evening meeting? Or, I mean, we kind of need to make sure we've got all of you present since we're so small of a committee.
I'm flexible.
What was that?
I'm flexible, so I don't care, whatever works for Carrie or whoever.
Clint, so 4:30 time is really hitting like end of your work day. Is that preferable to doing an evening meeting?
I work for you folks, so if it's 4:30, are you thinking on a WebEx platform or in back at the conference room? And then if you're back in the conference room, do you want to have WebEx support? Because then I'll have to make sure we have MIS
I'm fine
available and
doing
lined up.
WebEx. But Steve, how did this work for you? Is this okay?
Yeah, it's okay. I prefer in person, but it's working.
Well, maybe I feel like if we're shooting for a more evening time, that it's just easier to do it
Yeah.
via WebEx. Does that impact the time then that we need to shoot for, Clint?
Not for me. If it's, again, I'm just to make sure I've got if we're doing WebEx, it's less invasive on MIS staff. So
Right, but I'm just saying, like, because you usually like to get home first, right? If we do it at 4:30, does that give you the time that you need?
yeah, I'll be okay.
Does 4:30 sound good to the rest of you?
Yep.
Sure.
I'll probably be on a little late. I'll just get on a little later.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with saying 5, whatever you guys want. It's gonna be right over dinner, though. It's the other
I want something
consideration.
that's gonna be good for Clint and Troy both, because they're
I
using
know,
up their time to come here and do.
exactly. Clint,
Stuff that we want.
I'm asking you because I care. I know you say that you
Yep.
work for us, but we want to know.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 4:30, and I'll make it to the house before then. If it's 6:30 again, I can make any of those times work. So
What works better for your family?
probably later than I get past supper time.
Is that the same for you, Troy?
I'm fine either way. Yeah, I'll make it work.
Well, does the 6:30 time work for you guys again?
It's fine
It
with
does
me.
for me. Yep.
Yep.
What was that, Melissa?
It's fine for me, yeah.
Okay, so 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And I'm going to make sure that we've got as many as we can of those documents, of the responses in our folder. If for some reason we can't get them in the folder, I'll try to forward the email thread to all of you guys before the meeting so you can see it. So we'll need to discuss that. And then if we have time, maybe we can move on to the work plan, but I don't know. It'll depend on how comprehensive all these responses are. Oh, did we want to discuss before we adjourn tonight, agenda item number 11, which was the discussion and possible action on public input and updating the public by a public service announcement on WRCO.
Yeah, I brought that up because
Yeah.
I do feel like we were able to get a lot of support for the process when we did that with the Administrator Transition Committee, going on the radio and just explaining how we were going about doing it and what we were talking about. So it seems like we're almost to a point where I feel like it would be good to let the people know that we're doing this, right? And then, I mean, I think we want to be careful. We don't want to just open it up, so everyone can just make whatever suggestions they want and think that we're going to necessarily include every single thing that the community wants. But at some point, we either should have an article in the paper or we should have something just bringing it to the public's attention that they can, watch the videos online, that they can, who the committee members are, who they can talk to if they want to give input, things like that.
So I guess for the committee, what do you guys think about that? What would be the best format? What are we looking for as far as, are we asking for input or just telling them where they can find this information?
Madam Chair, I definitely think some awareness, some announcement of some kind. I'm just not familiar with the exposure comparison between the paper and the radio, and whether both are needed, or what our most effective way of doing it is.
I can't answer that either. I'm not the best
I think that the
consumer of
paper
either of
and the
those.
radio probably cater to the same group of people, the older, many of the older folks in our county. But the morning show, there's people do tune into the morning show when they want to learn more about particular items. Administrator Langrick, I mean, you've been on the radio several times. Have you felt like that's been an effective communication tool?
I get good feedback from it. People are listening. So most recent one was with the grant program for the early childhood education and daycare, and we ended up with 5 applicants that put together grant applications in just a little over 3 weeks. So it appeared to be effective in reaching the community.
Well, then the
Yeah, I mean, I have found that the
who
morning show is a
volunteers?
good way to get out to the people that actually care and are interested in what's going on in county government. Listen to that radio or read the Richland Observer.
I think they're both the way to go, unless you want to start doing a Facebook thing or make TikToks. I don't know. I do.
Yeah,
Do
the only
we
problem with
have
Facebook is it does get it can easily get out of control.
Do we even have a Facebook page as a county? I know HHS has one.
Got plenty of Facebook pages as a county.
No, I mean an official county Facebook page. Like I said, HHS actually has one. I didn't know. I
Yeah,
haven't
not
seen it.
not one that's just at the county government level. No, they're just individual departments have Facebook pages.
Okay.
And I'm not sure Facebook is the way to go. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
You can turn comments off when you post something. You can have it so you don't have people comment on it.
That's true. You can.
It would just require somebody who would actually moderate the whole Facebook page, and I mean that's more work than you might think.
But then again, if you turn the comments off, you're going to get people that share it to some other Facebook page groups, and that's where then they can comment on it. And it's just going to.
Well, but if you want input from the younger generation, that's a good conversation to have.
Well, we should talk about timing too, though. I mean, whether we do Facebook or not, the newspaper and the radio, we need to talk about timing and when we would do it.
I don't think we're going to tackle the Facebook problem right now, but I'm fine with newspaper and radio. The question would be, who volunteers to go on the radio?
Clinton and Melissa.
I'm not the chair this time.
Melissa, you keep bringing it up, and then you made the point to tell me that you absolutely hate going on the radio.
It was awful. I mean, it wasn't awful because I mean it was fine. It's just I'm not best in those circumstances. Let's just put it that way. I mean, we could go as chair and vice chair if you wanted, or we could just work with Dawn to create at the newspaper to create an article. That would be the other option.
Well, I don't think it's a bad idea to do both necessarily, particularly if the newspaper article came out maybe in advance and mentioned the radio spot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Administrator Langrick, do you want to go on the radio and talk about the strategic plan?
I can go on the radio and talk about the strategic plan.
I mean, maybe it is appropriate
I don't
to have you
mind
do.
going if I'm not by myself. I've never done it before, and that would be a little terrifying.
It's not too bad. Ron does a good job working with you, and he makes you feel like you're just having a conversation with him and me.
Ron is
And
very
it
good.
might be good to have both the perspective of the county administrator and representation from the board. I think having both perspectives there could be really good.
Okay.
I'll reach out to Ron and CC in the email, Ingrid, and see what types of availabilities he might have. If he can't do a morning show with us directly, we can set up a script, and then you'd be able to call in at a time you have more convenience, and he can kind of just record the conversation and play it.
Okay. And then I've never, and I don't know if any of you guys have, I'm sure Clint has. As far as working with putting together an article, I don't even know the process for that.
So Dawn, usually if you talk to Dawn Kiefer and tell her your interest in what you want, she'll call you, and she likes to do stuff remotely, and she just asks questions, and then she'll ask what you want to have out there, what you want the public to go, and then she kind of words it up, and then she'll take it all back, and then she'll write something up and put it in the paper. It's just a conversation. You sit down and talk with her, and she asks questions, and sometimes it may be on record, and sometimes it may be off record.
What were you saying, Melissa?
He's right. I've done that with her several times, where I just talked to her on the phone, and then she did the article. I mean, I made sure that I told her what I felt was important to communicate
Yes.
to the public, And then she also then asked questions that she had as well, so.
Okay.
I mean, if you don't want to do that one, I can do that one. But if you want to do that, that is absolutely okay with me too.
Okay, well, how about this, Melissa? Can I call you tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll have a conversation. All
Sounds
right.
good.
Are there any other future agenda items? I feel like we've got a pretty full plate with as is. But if anybody has good ideas.
Nope, I'm good.
Harry, Steve?
Good.
Okay.
I think it wouldn't, I do have one. It wouldn't hurt after we get our wording all together on this last chapter to maybe do another, just each of us kind of go back and look through everything and see if there's anything that jumps out at us, and then maybe nothing will, but just to make sure it still seems to say what we wanted it to.
Yeah, and on that note, if you guys think this is okay, I was going to ask MIS to actually make a separate folder in our strategic plan folder that basically just has the strategic plan documents, all of the final edited ones, so that we don't have to keep flipping back through various, which meeting date had the most current ones. Just make a folder that has the finalized edits, and then yes, we can review them. So
I vote for that.
yep, I will try to have that done before the next meeting. Melissa, once you finalize the edits on this one, actually, before I say that, did you guys all get a chance to review Troy's reorganization of Chapter 2?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Yet.
Okay, were you guys happy? Do you like that layout as opposed to the way we had it before?
I thought it worked. I mean, I was actually surprised that it wasn't harder because some things kind of fell into more than one category, but I thought he did a good job of getting things to fit.
Okay, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll put both of those two actions for Chapter 2 in that folder. And then Chapter 1, they'll all be separate. You can do finalized reviews and then put them together as a final document later.
So I still have to make some change. I still have to do some fixing of Chapter 3. We're not quite done. I can't do, because we didn't approve final edits. So we'll have to look at that one more time before we can say that one's final.
Okay. But maybe I could put what we've got so far in there, and then we can just update it later.
Oh yeah, to talk about next time. Yeah, once I finish writing the things that you've tasked me to write tonight.
Okay. The other thing I'll try to include was Troy also had emailed the work plan, what we have so far, kind of reorganized as well. So
yeah, because we do need to dive into that work plan. That's going to be the meat of this thing, and we're already almost to December.
Yes. So I'll get all of those into a folder, hopefully well in advance of before the next one, so that we can review those. Okay.
Madam Chair, I just had one more for you very quickly here.
Yes.
There's another spot to share our information on what we're doing with the committee. My terrific MIS staff just reminded me that on the administrator's homepage off of the Richland County page, there's an administrator's page. Underneath that, there's a drop tab actually for a strategic planning. That could be another spot where we could be housing articles. Not that we would have to put them. I mean, we could still have the same conversation with Dawn, but after it's released, we can be linking to that, as well as if we've got interviews, we can put it there. If there's other media type releases that you want, that could be a space too to utilize.
Okay, that sounds great. I kind of forgot that was there. So good reminder.
Thank you, Jason, if you're out there in cyber world, for the email.
Yes, and thank you for hosting our meeting. Okay, any other items or anything before we adjourn?
Just a thought. If you're reviewing what I pulled together, it struck me that our strategic priority focus has really only one item in it. but I think a lot of that is over on the capital improvement side. So I think the plan, as you read through them, could have some more, I don't know, some better flow from one chapter to the next. So it seemed a little slim, but I think focus is still very important based on what you all talked about. So for me, that struck out as a place that I'd welcome your thoughts on. So
Okay. All right. So we'll have to look at that. So was that just on the work plan or in the chapter itself?
yeah, in the chapter, there's only really one
Oh, I see what you're saying.
objective under that strategy of focus. But I know the focus stuff came up a lot with capital improvements, or what we're calling the non-mandatory stuff. So it looks slim. I don't think it is. So I don't know if there's a way to just join the chapters, or I don't know how to proceed there, but we could use some
Okay.
thought.
We'll have to review that too. Okay. Thank you, Troy. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we'll adjourn to November 22nd at 6:30 p.m. via WebEx. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll move.
I'll move.
Okay, moved by Carrie, second by Melissa. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you all. Have a great night. Thanks for sticking it out.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.